Brian, thank you so much for joining me, man. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. Quite surreal. So yeah, you're a former college athlete, enterprise AE at Gong, 7 Presidents Club to your name, 100K followers on LinkedIn, crazy successful side business. But I think more importantly, you are one of the most admired and respected voices in the entire industry of B2B tech. It is fantastic to be speaking with you, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me, Scott. Excited to be on.
Nice one. Well, I'm keen to kind of get into things and just dive into a few questions. I've tried to think a little bit outside the box and not just ask you, I don't know, how you got into sales. So we'll just rattle through it. So first one, you've been at Gong for obviously a long time now, and they release data, stuff behind the scenes, and I'm sure you've been soaking it up internally. Some of it makes its way onto LinkedIn, but I'm keen to hear from your perspective. What's like a lesser known insight that you've picked up over the years that Gong share in their data that separates the best reps from average reps?
Yeah, and I've been at Gong for a little over 4 years. I used Gong as a rep the previous 2 years as well at a previous company. So I've been like you looking at Gong data for almost 5+ years now, and it sits on top of such a valuable data set across all emails, calls, and web meetings. And then our value engineering and insights team will anonymize that data and look across billions of calls and emails to notice different trends. I'll give you two, if that's okay, that maybe are lesser known or haven't gotten as much attention. And it's because they're a little bit more boring, but they have a huge impact on your win rate, your sales velocity, and other metrics as well. The number one is just your email responsiveness. So, Scott, if I was working with you as a prospect, if you sent me an email, what we find is that top performers are way more urgent in terms of their response time. They're getting back within like an hour or a couple hours max if they're on another call, versus bottom performers sometimes wait an entire day or a couple days to get back to them. Again, a little bit more of a mundane, like boring statistic, but what you drive in terms of urgency, your customer and prospect tends to match that urgency throughout your cycle, and it'll make sure that you're the seller that's giving them the best experience. The other one as well is just total amount of activity. It's very highly correlated. The amount of time you're spending on customer facing calls has a direct correlation with how much revenue you're going to close over the given month or given quarter. So top performers, they do spend more time just talking to prospects, talking to customers, getting on those optional calls. It might be a biweekly sync with the customer success manager, or multi-threading and talking to a rep at that company, or somebody else that could offer a valuable perspective. Top performers are going out of their way to spend more time with prospects and customers. So two very easy things that are completely within your control that can help increase your win rates, drive more sales velocity, and create a better buying experience.
Do you know what? I'm laughing to myself because we recently had we did a quarterly QBR, right? And we pull up Gong. Interestingly, I'm always like top for the volume of calls, like the amount of time on customer facing calls. I'm always really high for that. It's almost like a running joke that I'm in constant like discoveries, and I agree. But interestingly, I'm actually typically right near the bottom when it comes to the responsiveness. And it's funny because when I was at Reach Desk, we spoke about sometimes playing it cool and actually maybe being like a little bit less responsive strategically in moments with prospects to be like, oh, I'm not too keen kind of thing. So I don't know. Do you think there's a time for being like playing it cool and maybe having a bit of like a cool off period between responding to an email, or do you use that data and you're like, cool, I'm gonna take that like on the nose and just like get back to people super quick?
Yeah, I lean more with your initial take. I think with any of these like statistics, like there's an 80-20 rule of, hey, in most situations you want to be more urgent, respond quickly, be super attentive. But there are situations where it makes sense to, I think, wait for the next day, or wait a couple of days. I'll give you one example. Yesterday, I had a really important presentation that was from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And by the time I was going to be able to respond to them, it was going to be around 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, where they're already offline. So does it really make sense in that situation to send that follow-up email when they're offline? They're not going to see it. They're going to start the next day and be behind on their inbox. Or does it make more sense to maybe draft up that email and strategically send it for 8:45 a.m. Eastern time the next morning when they're online, when they're not, flooded with emails from the previous day, and you're able to stay more top of mind. So I think as long as you think strategically about like, hey, when will they open this? What's the best time to get them to think about us in a positive light? I think that can guide your answer.
Nice. I'm glad to say that. But I think in general, I do probably need to be more on top in general, to be honest. All right, cool. I appreciate your take there. Super insightful. So, second question of three. You posted recently, is like in the last week or so, about spending 90 minutes per target account researching, building org charts, and breaking in. So, obviously, you've recently been promoted to enterprise earlier this year. So, can you talk me through that process? Because that felt like a long time. I guess it makes sense given you're an enterprise, but can you talk me through your process? What do you spend that 90 minutes doing? And have you got any success stories that come to mind within your account book that you can like share so far?
Yeah, I would love to share a story with it. And I want every seller to zoom out for a second. Like it does depend on your market and how many accounts you have, if you're small business or enterprise. But in my world, a couple of these enterprise accounts, a chief revenue officer that I'm reaching out to at a smaller public company, there's probably 100 other sellers that are also reaching out to them. It's not just our 5 competitors at Gong. It's maybe a lead agency, maybe a video company, maybe a tool for CRM, right? Different products as well. So if there's 100 individuals reaching out to that CRO, I want to be in that top 1% or 2% of outreach they get. And that's not going to come in the form of a generic sequence, a template that you changed a sentence on, or just giving them a cold call and giving them a generic pitch about what your solution solves for. So I try to take a very differentiated approach from how I go about prospecting for those marquee accounts and the marquee people at those marquee accounts. So just as an example of what I could spend the 90 minutes with, and this is a real example of an opportunity I sourced back in April, was the first thing I did was I went through that company and I looked, hey, were there any prior opportunities that we've had with that account? If so, who did we speak to? Why did it turn closed lost? Were they looking at competitors? What were their priorities? I want to come in with that perspective and not just be, hey, I'm Brian, I'm the new rep reaching out for the 15th time, right? I want to take that history and come in with more of a point of view. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I'm going to look at, hey, are those people still at the company? Who are new executives that came on board? And I'm going to start to org chart out like, hey, in a perfect world, if I had a discovery call tomorrow, who would I want that call to be with? Who would I want to start off the sales cycle knowing our product and the personas we find success with, as well as the personas on their side that tend to have the biggest problems our solution can help solve. Then from there, what I did was I created a more strategic plan for like, hey, how am I going to break into this account? So instead of just putting the CRO in a 22-step, 35-day sequence, what I went through is I actually started to message different individual contributors, think AEs, think SDRs. I also reached out to some lower level folks in enablement and RevOps. And my goal was to have 1 or 2 coffee chats with those folks, buy them coffee, learn a little bit more around their priorities, share how Gong has helped with similar companies, and use that information to then kind of package up and like reform my point of view. So I was able to successfully book 2 of those meetings with a AE as well as with like a sales enablement manager that was newer to the company. And what I then did is I built out a 1.5-page business case around like my point of view so far, where Gong can help in relation to their initiatives that they already had for 2025. So I had all of that ready to go. And that took me a couple of weeks, right? Versus just reaching out to them immediately. And what I did next was I went to that individual and I figured out, hey, who are they connected with in their network? And it turns out somebody at our company had spoken with them in the past. So I had that individual send a note to the CRO introducing them to me. And then I came in over the top. I attached my 1.5-page business case, my point of view. I bolded out, hey, I've had some conversations with your team. Here's where we found alignment. And I made a really low friction ask for 20 minutes. Now that seems like a ton of work. That seems like a lot of effort, but for an account that could be a $500,000 or $1 million deal, it's absolutely worth that level of effort to combine some like very, what I would call top tier differentiated strategies, like talking to somebody on the front lines first, using a warm intro, coming in with a really sharp point of view. And when you combine all those strategies together and compound them, that'll really put yourself in that 1%.
That's crazy. I was going to ask about the deal size, but yeah, I guess like 500K to a million, then it starts to put into context why you would front load so heavily. I don't want to make this about AI because it's kind of a bit annoying and boring to talk about, but you didn't mention AI in any of that. And I feel like a lot of reps are talking about it. And I feel like, especially account research, is often something that's like the go to example, like, oh, this is how I'm saving time. You didn't mention that once. Do you use AI in that process? Or is it like, I want to be organic and I want to hear from the horse's mouth on purpose kind of thing?
I do, but more in efforts for myself to speed up my research and my point of view versus I'm not using AI to make the cold call, or I'm not using AI to write my email to them. But where I did use it as a part of that process, two different areas. One, I used it to analyze the closed loss opportunity. So instead of sifting through the 15 calls we'd had with that account, I used Gong's AI to run a closed loss brief to basically bucket out those pieces of information so I could get those answers really quickly. Because in the past, if I had to listen to all those calls and rewatch, all those clips and read those emails, that could be 4 or 5 hours. And then the other area I leveraged was for account research. So as I was building up that point of view, they had a recent earnings call. So I used AI to put the earnings transcript in and ask some really pointed questions around like, hey, what are some existing company level objectives or slogans or internal lingo that they already have set aside for 2025 where then Gong can potentially attach to. So I kind of sifted through, hey, these are the 5 objectives that they've stated over and over in those earnings. And then I tied to one of them being like, hey, I know we can help in that area.
Nice. Okay, interesting. So you were using it in different ways. You're such a perfect like spokesperson for Gong as well, by the way. And the way you tie it back in is, I'm sure, appreciated by everyone in the product marketing team for sure.
Hard not to.
Exactly. All right, final question, man. I really appreciate your insights so far. I've learned a lot even in this brief chat. So you are, I think it's fair to say one of the highest performing A's in the industry, certainly that I know of. I don't know many people, especially at this age with 7 Presidents Club, to prove it. So in your career, how have you gone about investing in yourself to improve your capabilities? I know I've seen like Sandler on your LinkedIn, and you're familiar with lots of these frameworks. So like, what have you done to go above and beyond and go out your way to invest in yourself to get to this point where you are now?
It's a great question, and it's definitely something I take pride in. Even joining enterprise, like come in with the expectation, like sure, I'd been successful in mid-market and commercial or small business, but I'm new in enterprise. By default, I'm the worst rep, and that's okay. It's going to be a work in progress, and I need to continue to level up all of my skills. Where I turn to first is always internally. I don't go to LinkedIn and follow my favorite influencer and immediately apply their tactics. I look internally first, because if you're fortunate enough that you have a company where there's other reps that have already been successful, that's going to be the best lens to learn from and apply to, because that's the same product that you're going to be selling. That's the same segment that you're going to be selling into. That's the same persona that you're going to be speaking to. So it's always going to be more relevant looking internally first, as long as you're not like the founding AE at the company and there's nobody else to turn to. Now, what you do next is really, really key. I don't just slack the top performing rep and say, hey, Scott, I'm going to throw 48 minutes on your calendar to pick your brain. I think that's a really lazy approach of going about it. Instead, what I want to do is analyze myself first, almost run some discovery. You can partner with your manager on it, but hey, I'm Brian, I'm new to enterprise. What's the biggest skill that's holding me back right now from being a top performer in enterprise? Identify 1, maximum 2 skills that you want to work on for that month or that quarter. That's it. If you try to work on 10 skills, you'll improve 0. If you go all in on improving 1 or 2, you will improve those 1 or 2. Next, what you want to do is identify, hey, say discovery is the area I'm trying to work on. Who is the absolute best at discovery in my segment that's still like on playbook and on brand, right? Not the rep that's been there for a decade that just is a lone wolf that does their thing their own way. Who's somebody that's recently gone through it, right? Maybe been promoted a year ago, found a ton of success, and is awesome at that individual skill. The next thing I'll do, let's say that's Jenna. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to Slack Jenna and say, hey, Jenna, like, what are a couple of examples you have of like where you nailed discovery? There are a couple of calls I can listen to. Have you ever put together a deck for a training session or other groups? I'd love to learn async and take that work off you, but be able to learn from how you go about that. The next thing you do is you just have to go and actually put in the work, listen to those clips, see what material they put together, take notes, immediately practice it, say it out loud. And then last but not least, at that point, if you do have questions like, hey, Jen, I, listen to a couple of calls. Like, I'm curious why you always, summarize what they say back as your second question, or do this here. Then I think you have the right to go to them and say, hey, Jen, I'd love to earn 20 minutes of your time. I listened to those 5 calls you sent over. I watched your onboarding session around discovery, and I had like 3 pointed questions, and I would love the chance to get to introduce myself. At that point, you can set up time, get a little bit deeper with that individual. And then from there, it's really just about speed to learnings. I think a lot of people soak up good material, or they hear something great on a call, like, damn, that's a good talk track. And then they don't use it over the next week, and it's, in one ear, out the other. Anytime I learn something, my goal is to put it into practice as quickly as possible, literally same day if I can, if not at minimum that very same week.
It's golden advice. And do you know what strikes me is is almost mirroring your approach that you described with the CRO. You're doing your research, you're being analytic, you're finding information from different resources, and then you're thinking about what's the most direct way and pointed question I can ask in order to achieve the outcome, right? It's almost like the same approach. My one question to you would be, you're right, when you're at Gong, you can go internally and there's an army of top reps. Same with Monday. There's talent coming out your ears. What do you say to the people who I'm sure are people buying your courses, and certainly the people that I help as well, who are at the Series A companies where they haven't got the structure, they haven't got the frameworks, they haven't got great sales leadership, and they haven't got top colleagues they can lean into? What's your advice to people in that kind of position who can't lean on that internal resource as much?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be really clear. Like, I do think the best option over buying my courses or anyone else is to look internally first. I would scream that 10 times over. But I think you can do multiple things, right? And you can do things in parallel. Doesn't mean that's the only way of your self-improvement and learning. I also do want to take in some outside perspectives. So a couple resources for me. I like podcasts. So for me, like 30 Minutes to President's Club, top tier content, like really thoughtful approach to how they go about things. Grit is also a great podcast, GRIT, where they bring on different business leaders. Just helps with like business acumen and knowing what's happening in different industries and how different personas are thinking about the challenges in their world. And then outside of that as well, I do think LinkedIn, X as well are a great platform. I think just really keep in mind like who you're following and how much they line up with you. Like if you're taking advice from the person that recently got promoted to small business AE that's been there for 6 months versus you're an enterprise, like those aren't necessarily going to apply quite as smoothly. So just keep in mind, one, like the context of who they're selling to and the segment, but also number two, like how successful are they? Think about if you're in the classroom, like, are you going to cheat with the person that's getting a C- in the class that's failing, or are you going to look at the person that's getting an A+ and acing all their tests? So just keep that in mind as well, because there's plenty of people that will share content and share their learnings, but I want to make sure that it actually works and there's some proof points behind it.
100%. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate your time. I mean, I followed you for, I don't know, 4 years at least, 5 years maybe on LinkedIn. So to actually connect with you is genuinely just extremely exciting, and I appreciate everything you've done. You're a pioneer of LinkedIn. You're a pioneer of B2B sales content. You're a huge inspiration to me with the side business you've launched, and I know you're a huge inspiration to basically every AE out there. So thank you for all of that, man, and thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. Honestly, great to have you here, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Yeah, amazing meeting you, Scott, and thanks so much for having me.